I would like to welcome to the show Joseph Lubin, who's the founder and CEO of ConsenSys, and Juan Benet, who's the founder and CEO of Protocol Labs. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks, Naomi.
Thank you very much.
We're going to dive into all things Filecoin today, but there was some very exciting news announced. There is a collaboration between Protocol Labs and ConsenSys. To start us off, Juan, I would love to just hear from you. Do you want to just give an overview of Filecoin and why this is important?
Yeah, definitely. Filecoin is a blockchain that aims to build a decentralized, robust, and efficient foundation for humanity's information. And it creates a decentralized storage network where miners on one side provide storage, and then clients on the other side use that storage. So you can think of it like an Airbnb kind of model, but for cloud storage, where anybody can add racks and racks of hard drives and rent that out to people on the internet. And it is blockchain first. It is you use cryptocurrency to hire the storage, and now the network it has about 600 plus petabytes of capacity, which is a huge amount of data waiting there for people to use it. So now a whole bunch of applications in Web3 can now actually use a proper cloud blockchain native storage structure as opposed to having to use kind of like the centralized cloud system.
And that's a pretty impressive goal there, moving away from this reliance that we've had on centralized servers. It really does feel like we're moving into the future. Looking at all of the decentralized applications we have currently, we're starting to decentralize storage, we're decentralizing finance. Like it's a pretty exciting world that we're moving into. So let's talk about the launch of Filecoin. So this happened last week. How has that all gone so far?
Well, launching a blockchain is not an easy feat. It's been something we've been working on and working towards for many, many years. And the network moved from the testnet into the mainnet with, again, a huge amount of capacity. And that went very smoothly. It was a big moment for a lot of people around the world. Thousands of miners around the world participated in all of the storage that added up to the network. And now it's live. The network is live. There are applications on it using the storage. And yeah, we're here today.
Absolutely. I feel like it was one of the most anticipated launches from this sort of 2017 ICO boom. This project, a lot of people were looking at it, eyeing it, waiting for this moment. And they've been waiting for a while. And finally, you guys have launched. People like Eric Voorhees have said, this is one of the most well-executed projects out there. Keep an eye on it. Like it seems pretty exciting. And then the news today. So ConsenSys just announced that there's this collaboration with Protocol Labs. The idea is that we're going to be growing the decentralized storage ecosystem and integrating it with Ethereum at every layer of the decentralized technology stack. Joseph, do you want to walk us through what exactly that means?
Might take too much time to enumerate all the different...
Do you want to spend the next several hours going into depth? Well, let's start with talking about the ConsenSys product suite. Yeah. Just talk about, first of all, I'd love to hear from you, like, why is Filecoin interesting to the Ethereum ecosystem? Why is this something that you guys wanted to integrate with?
We certainly started life as an Ethereum company, and we still are an Ethereum company, but the long-term goal for, I think, many in our ecosystem is to build a decentralized protocols ecosystem, which consists of different kinds of blockchains that subserve different purposes. So trusted transactions, guaranteed execution of agreements, benefit from distributed storage. All of that benefits from bandwidth and identity and heavy compute and proof of location that are all based on decentralized protocols. So the reason that we are so excited to have been working with Protocol Labs for quite a long time and continue to work with them heavily in the future and to offer as much functionality as we can, both into their ecosystem and interoperating with many elements that ConsenSys puts out or that are already running in the Ethereum ecosystem, is simply because applications require lots of different functionality, and this is the next generation of the World Wide Web, the increasingly decentralized World Wide Web. And so we have been collaborating with Juan and the many teams in the Protocol Labs ecosystem to build out several, we can call them products. Some of it's R&D work that's leading to products. Some of it has been taken up by our product teams. Those include our commerce and decentralized finance group, Codify. It includes our infrastructure group, Infura. It includes the Metamask wallet and plugin system team. And so we're essentially approaching this from a full stack, full functionality perspective. A couple of the initial elements that are launching immediately or soon are, two of them are coming out of our Codify group. One is Codify Activate has built a Filecoin storage market. So essentially that enables a view of the storage marketplace. It can be accessible through a web app or through an API. Goal is make price discovery for storage on the Filecoin network as efficient, transparent as possible. And so miners who offer data storage services will be able to use the app to essentially expose what they're offering, announce pricing and availability. And so just an elegant interface so that users can access the available storage.
Let's dive into that for a little bit, because I want to kind of talk about how the storage system works. Because you guys, as you mentioned, this new product suite does have a lot of different components. There's the storage system, the DeFi bridge, all of that. So let's go through them one at a time and kind of dig into it. Juan, do you want to also maybe just give us a little bit of an explanation of how this storage system works in a bit more detail? And then we can talk about how this integration with ConsenSys and with the Ethereum network, what this is all going to look like.
Yeah, sounds good. So I'll describe how Filecoin works kind of a bit at a high level, and then also mention the integration point to Ethereum kind of back and forth and like what each brings to the other. So in the beginning of our development, there was IPFS, and IPFS is a content addressed storage distribution system that allows you to address information with a cryptographic hash. And that's been super useful for all of Web3 and all of the decentralized web work. It became kind of one of the main ways to build dApps over the last 5 years. A lot of Ethereum applications, for example, use IPFS to address information, whether it's a front end for a UI for an application, or whether it's actually data that's being computed on, or where there's a smart contract referring to some piece of data and whatnot. Notably, like ENS points names, kind of like the domain name system, but the Ethereum name system points names to IPFS hashes to build websites. And so you can now have an ENS powered domain name on the Ethereum blockchain that points to an IPFS hash, and you can get the website from IPFS. But now one of the big problems that had been kind of longstanding was that all of that IPFS data had to be stored in IPFS nodes that either you were running individually, or you were kind of hiring another party to store for you. And usually when you hire another party, and by the way, Infura has been one of the best pinning services. This is what we call these services, storing IPFS content for many years. Usually they run on top of kind of centralized cloud infrastructure. And for a lot of applications and for a lot of systems, it would be really, really useful and nice to be able to make that process itself decentralized and make it kind of make that the actual storage of the network be blockchain powered, as opposed to having to go on the centralized network. And so that's where Filecoin comes in. So Filecoin comes in as a way to say, okay, great, you have your IPFS hashes pointing to a lot of content, whether it's data or websites or images, whatever it may be, and let's just store that in the decentralized network itself. And so you can think of all of the current apps that already use IPFS as being able to now back up all of that data to Filecoin. And so that's kind of what Filecoin brings to the table. So for a lot of Ethereum developers, what that means is now they can have long-term storage that is crypto-powered and crypto-native without having to sort of rely on a more Web2-oriented model. But it also means you can start writing contracts that kind of hire out that storage in a more automated way. So maybe you no longer have to have an organization that kind of hires a storage provider to store the data. now you can have a contract hiring the network to store the data. And like that's a kind of paradigm shift that's pretty important. So for Ethereum developers, that brings a whole bunch of functionality. Now in the reverse, Ethereum has the most diverse and prolific smart contract platform out there. You have all kinds of systems and contracts built out in Ethereum, and the biggest DeFi invented the whole like DeFi world, and the biggest network of DeFi systems. And so that brings all of the power of both smart contracts and the applications you might build with kind of like business logic on Ethereum to Filecoin and the storage in Filecoin and Ipfs, plus all of sort of the decentralized finance aspects of being able to create all kinds of contracts and financial instruments and structures that the DeFi enables you to do. And so, for example, right now, one of the big things that people in the Filecoin ecosystem want to be able to do is be able to kind of like loan out Filecoin to be able to use it as part of collateral. So that's one of the areas where Ethereum is perfect for this kind of thing.
I love this movement towards taking out these centralized players. I think we've had such a reliance on things like Cloudflare and AWS, and like if either of these things go down, the whole internet goes down. So I love the idea of finding alternatives and really moving towards this decentralized future there. But there's also another element of this which you kind of touched on, and I want to talk about how this new storage system interface is going to help with this. Is this price discovery mechanism, the ability for people to have competition in the market, to source out people who can compete with storage prices and all that. Joseph, do you want to walk us through exactly how this is going to play out and how this benefits consumers if they're looking for better deals?
So it's a free and open market. Miners who have storage to offer can do so at different prices and indicate what the characteristics of that particular deal are. And essentially, a deal proposal can be put together, enabling customization of storage based on price, storage amount, duration, and there are rich expressive dimensions for those who want to store data, and similarly for those who are offering storage.
So will this interface give people the ability to know in some cases what they're storing? Or because I've heard that there are certain ways that this could operate as a more efficient way of getting data to people. Like if you want to access a video and you realize that the video isn't available in Singapore, for example, then you might host it in Singapore, and that's like just a quicker way for people to get access to this. So, but my understanding is that everything is highly encrypted in the Filecoin network. And so through this interface, that you guys are creating, are there different levels that in some cases people will know what they're storing, in other cases they will just agree to store kind of a bulk collection of data?
Yeah, so Juan can provide a more detailed answer than I am able to, but certainly there is primary storage and retrieval where essentially you know what you stored and you can go ahead and retrieve that. But there's also a really important CDN functionality where certain groups, organizations are aware of certain content and are aware that that content will be in demand at a certain point in time, perhaps in a certain region of the world, and they can configure their resources and the data that they're actually storing so that they can profitably supply that when there is demand.
In the question that you asked around, kind of knowing what you're storing and so on, certainly if an application, usually applications will encrypt all their content before adding it in and sending it to a miner. And so a miner won't be able to kind of look at the actual content itself. But miners and clients know who each other are for the most part. Like high reputation clients and high reputation miners might actually know which parties they're transacting with. Of course, this is pseudonymous, so anybody can generate kind of unknown identifiers, like in any blockchain. And so you have some degree of anonymity that's available. But for the most part, kind of as reputation develops in the ecosystem, miners in general might be selective about what data from what clients they might access. This ends up becoming pretty important around the world in terms of different kind of content policies that have to have to be followed by various different people around the world. And so one of the big principles that we've had for Web3 for a very long time is that you want to put the power and decision making in the user's hands, like in the human's hands, of what they want to do with the computing environment. So this really means sort of having really good sane defaults for parties in various different countries and whatnot, but really leave it up to the users to sort of decide the content policy that's appropriate for the network. And then that content policy mapped to a reputation system can handle most of the kinds of problems that might arise around knowing exactly what you need to be storing and whatnot. So that's kind of like the way to address that area of things. But in general, the content itself, you need it all to be encrypted, because you don't want any application user would not want their content viewable by anybody. And one really important thing here is today, when you store your content on the centralized cloud, it's usually sort of encrypted on the way there, but then decrypted and stored in the clear. So most of your personal data and your business data is stored in the clear in the cloud somewhere. So that means that the cloud provider can see it, the people running the infrastructure for the cloud provider could theoretically see it. Of course, they have policies to prevent any kind of abuse, but that's only as strong as those organizations and those policies are. We've seen a lot of different kinds of abuses worldwide where certain governments like overstep or certain companies overstep, or maybe hackers go in and like breach a whole bunch of private sensitive data. And so we think it's really important that the Web3 brings kind of user-controlled encryption or user protecting encryption that puts the power in users' hands to decide who they actually want to share that information with, their personal private information with, and create a sort of self-sovereign identity and self-sovereign data storage medium. And that's where Filecoin really shines, because by default, all the data should be kind of encrypted in the user side, and the source provider should just not be able to look at that information.
And there's also this interesting part of Filecoin where I believe like everything is uniquely encrypted, so you can actually see how many copies of what you want to store are out there. Like when you put things in a centralized server, you're kind of hoping that, well, I'm storing this, let's hope they have a backup, and you're kind of trusting them. But this actually provides a cryptographic proof of how many copies of your data is out there, which is really cool part of the system. I want to dive into the DeFi bridge. So Ethereum has really been this stronghold of the DeFi movement. They've really created it to a certain degree because of this interoperability. You have this entire world that's developed with all these different interchangeable assets. Like it's a pretty exciting world. So I wanted to dive into this and say, like, what are the benefits to Filecoin of a system like this? So Joseph, do you want to start us off there?
Sure. So again, our Codify team has built what we're calling a DeFi bridge between the Ethereum protocol and the Filecoin protocol. It enables the FIL token to effectively move across the bridge, turning into an ERC20 wrapped FIL token so that it can participate in Ethereum-based DeFi activities. So one can earn yield potentially on their wrapped file. One could contribute some wrapped file to a set protocol portfolio and see it perhaps automatically managed in that portfolio. One can lend or borrow the wrapped file token, which is extremely valuable, especially in the early stages of the rollout of the Filecoin ecosystem, because many who want to participate in storing data on the network need to effectively stake file tokens on the network. And so one can acquire wrapped file tokens and convert them into native Filecoin file tokens by sending them back over the bridge and use those for staking purposes, so that one can increase one's capacity with respect to staking.
Every time you say one can create one's capacity, I keep wondering, are you saying one can create capacity? Like, I'm just like, what is this one?
It's just me and the machines. Like they have me in the server rack, handling all the storage myself.
Exactly. So there's also this, I mean, as well as liquidity being provided and this really helping the Filecoin ecosystem, you've also got this user base. So MetaMask has this giant user base, and there's also this integration that's happening with MetaMask. Do you guys want to dive into explaining what that will look like and how that benefits both sides, both the Ethereum network and Filecoin?
Sure, I'll start. MetaMask is doing astonishingly well. We're at around 1.5 million users, most of whom are monthly actives, and recently rolled out a swaps platform, which is doing really, really well. So Filecoin is essentially taking a prominent role. We have a plugin architecture or an extensible API system called Metamask Snaps that enables essentially new functionality to be brought into the MetaMask ecosystem. So it enables other protocols to be connected to by MetaMask. And in this situation, we're going to roll out a snap that essentially shows, connects to the Filecoin network, shows different data around the file token, provides network access, RPC APIs, and this is a sort of first pass enablement of file within MetaMask, and of course that will make file available in all of the trading and other functionalities that that MetaMask has rolled out and will continue to roll out, but also file token is all about storage, and so one might see storage implicated within MetaMask as well at some point.
Juan, did you want to add on?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that Dan Finlay from MetaMask actually gave a talk earlier today about talking about the snaps and the Filecoin snap. I'll link it here in the chat. And yeah, it's really amazing and remarkable to be able to actually see a demo of Filecoin actually in the MetaMask UI and being able to use it. All of the MetaMask by far is the kind of most used portal to the blockchain world, and so for any kind of dApp to be able to use Filecoin seamlessly and so on, being integrated with MetaMask is a huge thing, right? And so being able to use Filecoin right away from all kinds of applications, and being able to kind of think of being able to take a bunch of the dApps that are out there right now, already transacting with Ether or any of the ERC20 tokens on Ethereum, and now being able to kind of associate user data storage alongside their application, and then being able to pay for that data storage themselves. So those are the kinds of things that start becoming possible once you start associating your wallet, your identity, your wallet with Filecoin itself as well. And so possibilities include like the kind of like the ENS naming thing that I mentioned earlier. Imagine just being able to pay for your storage bill for your or bandwidth bill directly from your wallet as well, in the same kind of way, as opposed to having to go through another service.
Yeah.
Let me just jump in there. There's a lot going on here. Filecoin provides an enormous amount of high-powered functionality. Some of it's around pure data storage, but I think it's really important to emphasize what I think of as the holy grail of our ecosystem, which is providing tools that enable people to build fully decentralized applications. And so you can build partially decentralized applications on Ethereum. You can go to some effort to make them more decentralized or fully decentralized. And by that, I mean that you really need the user interface elements to be decentralized or to be sitting in distributed permissionless storage. And so that's one of the real breakthroughs here, where the front ends of these applications whose back ends might be sitting on Ethereum are now fully permissionlessly decentralized. And the MetaMask Snap is basically able to detect or is detectable by any Web3 enabled site. So any fully decentralized application will be able to instantly detect and communicate with a decentralized wallet in the form of MetaMask.
That's really cool, and also cool to see how through this iterative process, people are making these systems more robust just by taking out, centralized mechanisms one by one, and we're kind of figuring out as a community using different projects like the integration of Ethereum and Filecoin, figuring out how to make this possible. It's really beautiful to watch that blossoming there. So there are, as you mentioned, have already been lots of companies interacting with IPFS for a long time. You mentioned that Ethereum has been using IPFS for a long time, and really this is now the monetization of IPFS, which is very cool. I wanted to talk about some of the companies that are interacting with this, because it seems that the network has been seeded by certain verified providers who are storing things that are important to all of us, like WikiLeaks or climate data, or all of these things that we kind of want to exist on the internet without the ability for it to be tampered with, for example. So I wanted to just talk about that process, and then we'll go into talking about Ethereum in particular, and how they've been using this IPFS system over the years, dig into that a bit more. But Juan, can you explain to me this verified storage provider, a storer, I should say, system, and how that works?
Yeah, totally. So maybe I'll mention some of the organizations that have been kind of diving into this, and then I'll mention kind of like the verified storage service and how that's gonna develop. So the whole Filecoin ecosystem has been kind of growing tremendously over the last year. More and more organizations are starting to gravitate to it and joining the chain and joining the ecosystem and building out different parts of the tooling or building applications and so on. First and foremost, just the mining companies are a huge fraction of that, right? Like there's a lot of individuals and groups that are even forming companies or have formed companies that have been in operation for a while to mine Filecoin. And these are kind of like the storage providers. So that's one part. Then there's a whole bunch of folks building developer tools. So there's groups like Textile and Fleek, and now Truffle and others, and Metamask and whatnot, that are bringing a bunch of the developer tooling to the ecosystem, and so building ways of plugging in your applications and so on. And then there's groups that are actually going through and starting to build out different kinds of applications. And so we had a hackathon about, I think, a month and a half ago that yielded about 100 plus projects that are now building a lot of their stuff on Filecoin. Right now, there's two things going on. One is the Apollo Fellows program, where there's a whole bunch of other applications developing as well. There's a number of groups that are doing ETH Online as well, that are kind of hacking on the network. And so from all of those, there's some fraction of those that will go on and become applications that stand the test of time, right? So many things that we use today actually started as hackathon projects and things like that. But there's also kind of much more kind of fleshed out applications coming to the Filecoin ecosystem. Many of these are just groups that have been using IPFS for a long time that are now kind of starting to migrate. And some of them are entirely new. So one that we're really proud of is Slate, which is think of it kind of like a kind of part social network, part photography website. It's like a really nice user experience that almost at this point it feels indistinguishable from Web 2, and like that's an amazing kind of line to cross. Like there's a threshold where suddenly a Web 3 app just feels indistinguishable from kind of like a normal centralized application, and that's the bar you want to hit to be able to, for Web 3 to really cross the chasm and kind of really build the consumer applications of the future. That kind of bar has to be hit, and like that's a really great place to be. So now the verified clients program. So where this came from was that Filecoin has a specific problem around being able to tell whether or not data is so if you incentivize a lot of data storage to be added to the network, then parties could collude and kind of hire themselves for storage. And And so you can create kind of like this feedback loop in the incentive structure where you're not actually storing anything real or useful. You're just kind of sort of hiring yourself. So the way we solved that was with kind of like a layer 2 protocol where clients that want to store a lot of data can sort of get a verifiable claim added to the network that kind of states that their application is kind of trusted up to a certain amount of data. And so you can think of this as a very easy sort of verification process where, imagine there's a video site and they say, hey, we generate about 100 terabytes of data per day or per month or something like that. And they get kind of this claim that gives them that amount of data to be able to add to the network. And that verifiable claim gives them the ability to greatly incentivize miners to store that data. So it creates this multiplier in the block reward for them that makes that data very sought after. So what that does is that it creates the ability for the parties that join that program and kind of go through this additional kind of verification to kind of prove to the network that they are indeed storing really valuable and useful data. Then it gives them dramatically cheaper storage prices than otherwise, right? So you can have totally anonymous content that nobody kind of checks and whatnot, and that set a particular price point that the network prices. And then there's kind of like a very large discount for parties that go through that additional verification process. And that gives the network this ability to just point to extremely valuable data sets that we want to be backed up and replicated for the long term, and just make it incredibly cheap to store that. So think of archives of scientific data. Think of Wikipedia. Think of all the open access journals, like all of the really valuable historical data for humanity, and be able to replicate it a ton across the network and extremely cheaply. So we want to create a kind of like an arc of all the valuable information for humanity and make it super cheap to store.
That's cool. And so this sort of board that exists to verify these users, is there a path to making this a more decentralized process?
Yeah, so it's sort of is community governed, and it's kind of like a 3-layer structure where the community, through kind of a repository on GitHub, kind of accepts applications for verifiers, and these verifiers are entities tasked with going through that, tasked with running the verification process. So think of this similar as kind of how you might build an identity system. So a decentralized identity system, if you wanted to actually check that humans are indeed humans, you do have to kind of have some sort of verifiable claim pulled in somewhere, and you do need some kind of real world verification moved in. So think of this as the same sort of process. So once these verifiers are accepted by the community, and that itself is a decentralized governance process, then those verifiers are trusted again up to a certain amount, right? So and then those verifiers are on the hook for making sure that the verifications they give to clients are good and correct, and so on. There's a whole talk about this whole system this week, so I'm kind of glossing over a lot of the details that goes into it at much greater depth. But that layer system allows us to sort of pick verifiers across the world. So you want a number of entities around the world that will know the organizations in those regions of the world and will know kind of what is a legitimate organization versus not. And you also want verifiers across a wide variety of use cases. So in a sense, you can think of the verifiers in the system as being kind of like a business development arm, where you kind of pick a super node in an industry that knows all of the other organizations that understand that industry, and you empower them with this like super cheap discount on data storage. And you say, hey, like you know all the right organizations in your network, go and offer them this like amazing storage deal. And then that's a it's a way to turn it around. It's not just gatekeepers, it's really recruiting a decentralized business development arm.
Yeah. Joseph, so you mentioned before that there are lots of Ethereum and ConsenSys apps that have been using IPFS for years through Infura. And the idea is that, Ethereum app data can be stored geographically distributed way, that it's not necessarily centralized. Does this supplement the idea of like Ethereum nodes, for example, also being geographically dispersed? That idea of keeping this network robust, like how do those different things interplay with each other?
So let me answer the Infura question first, and then maybe I can expand a little bit. We have indeed been providing API access to IPFS for quite a long time, and using it in many consensus applications and in applications across the Ethereum ecosystem. So it's pinning and accessing pinned content. I think that there are millions of unique objects that have been stored, and I think it's over there's a lot of data transfer every day around this this application. We are moving into a beta for a Filecoin API. So first of all, we're increasing the capabilities of the IPFS API through Infura, and also launching a beta for Filecoin. The beta will essentially provide an API to the Filecoin network. Developers will be able to get the state of the network in real time, read directly from the Filecoin blockchain, send payments, send other messages to the network, query the state of the Filecoin markets, and answering your second question is I think interesting and complicated. There are lots of Ethereum nodes around the world, and the spread and number of those nodes make it into a pretty massively decentralized protocol, and moving towards becoming a much more massively decentralized protocol. And in order for it to take its place or continue its place in being a new trust foundation for the planet, along with some other decentralized protocols or distributed storage protocols, we need to define the different dimensions of decentralization and make sure that we are decentralized across all of those dimensions. And so, yeah, absolutely, IPFS and Filecoin enable applications that are reliant on the Ethereum Trust Foundation to be trustworthy, because all the different elements that applications rely on are indeed being implemented by decentralized protocols. I think one thing that's really powerful that's going on here with the launch of Filecoin is that we have another heavyweight, another first-class layer 1 blockchain protocol being introduced into the world. I think that's momentous. I consider, so there are lots of projects that call themselves layer 1 protocols. I think two legit heavyweight layer 1 protocols are Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I would argue that as we build out the decentralized protocol ecosystem, Filecoin will rapidly take its place as one of those heavyweight protocols.
Yeah, for sure. So we've got a bunch of audience questions. Before I dive into those, I wanted to just kind of look forward to the future and what we're most excited about in this system. So we've talked a lot about, Web 3.0, this new decentralized age that we're entering. You got things like Ethereum, IPFS, Filecoin, different things that have become this hallmark of this decentralized web. So just looking at that and this, interoperation of all this, and I think Ethereum's really led the way there about the idea of different platforms, different protocols having this interoperability, and we've seen how that works. And now you see Ethereum and this interoperability with other things like Filecoin, which is very interesting. So I just want to look forward to the future. And looking at Web 3.0, like how difficult is it going to be to achieve this truly decentralized internet that we really want? And do you see that happening anytime soon? What sort of a role will Ethereum, ConsenSys, Filecoin all play in this? Juan, do you want to start us off there?
Yeah, well, I think when you compare the current centralized cloud infrastructure and all of the work that has gone into that for many decades to optimize all of it for all kinds of deployed use cases, and you compare it against sort of the blockchain Web3 world that is kind of coming in to decentralize those environments, kind of break them up and so on. There's a huge amount of efficiency that has been achieved by these centralized parties, and a huge amount of lock-in. So think of the app platforms in phones and in desktop supercomputers and so on that really control and censor what applications might go on there, right? So for a long time, cryptocurrency was sort of banned from app stores and whatnot. So there's kind of like a significant advantages there that have to be overcome, and really it's by leaning on kind of the amazing unfair advantages that blockchains and Web3 have that really provide features and functionality that are just either very difficult, outright impossible, or unlikely to happen in a centralized world, right? So you can have networks that, for example, share ownership with the user base in a way that very few, if any, kind of centralized organizations have ever built. And so that alone might create a very large critical mass of users around an application that might force it to open up. So a good example of this might be the music applications, right? So Ujo and Audius are two examples of music applications that are using Ethereum and Ipfs that are building very large communities and are putting the sort of the power of the distribution in the artist's hands and in the audience to connect together through the platform. And that's sort of coming in and building a very strong network effect between the people, and that alone has been kind of successful enough to actually get all their applications into the relevant app stores and whatnot. And so it'll be interesting to see how those applications develop and compete with the centralized counterparts. Now, in terms of the lower level infrastructure, to really reach sort of the billions of users worldwide and trillions of transactions per second that these large scale applications really do, that's where blockchains will have to scale quite a bit. So this is where today there might be used for a lot of the sort of main business logic, or for giving consensus on kind of an accumulated log of transactions. But we really need kind of the scalability that things like Ethereum 2 will bring to be able to actually process the magnitude of transactions that those kinds of applications really require. So there's a few angles here. One is being able to do the data storage, right? So something like Instagram or YouTube store exabytes of video. And that's really a staggering figure of storage. And something like Filecoin, before Filecoin, the largest decentralized storage networks, kind of had a few petabytes of capacity. But now we have hundreds of petabytes of capacity close to reaching an exabyte. And now that's actually starts contending with those centralized cloud parties. You could actually now consider and conceive of an application platform that could actually grow to the scale of the Web 2 heavyweights. And so that's just something that wasn't really possible before, and now it's becoming possible. So looking at the computing stack, you have to hit storage, you have to do all the different kinds of computation, you have to do very efficient computation, you have to do kind of like the trust layer and like the business logic of systems, and really lean into kind of the unfair advantages of Web3, where you can build stronger connections with the community, you can make kind of user-owned systems from the get-go, as opposed to kind of corporation-controlled systems, and where you can put kind of the rights of users first with better models of encryption and user control, self-sovereign identity, self-sovereign data, and all those kinds of facilities will be the advantages that get us to move over. But there's a large stack to build out still.
Yeah, Joseph.
Yeah, let me take a sort of broader perspective on that question. So if you ask Tim Berners-Lee how hard it would be to stand up a hypertext-based infrastructure for all the world's information and all the world's e-commerce and mobile and social networking, he'd say dauntingly hard. I'm just not even gonna continue this little HTTP and HTML project that I've got going. If you ask Steve Jobs how hard it would be to significantly own the mobile phone market by putting supercomputers in people's pockets and building applications stores so that much computer functionality is delivered through that, he would say, of course, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it in layers. And we saw that the first rollout of the iPhone didn't even have cut and paste. You couldn't copy text and paste it somewhere else. And so not only did functionality have to be incrementally introduced, but it had to be, understanding and capability had to be incrementally introduced into people. So the people evolved nearly as much as the product. If you ask Vitalik Buterin, how hard is it going to be to stand up a blockchain platform that is fully scalable for all the world's tokenized financial transactions and usable and has privacy and confidentiality? He would have said that's really hard. Let's launch this practical, smaller, almost proof of concept system first. And so what Juan and team have done in standing up a massive blockchain project in a large storage ecosystem that they built needs to proceed in layers. They've done an amazing job of incentivizing miners and building proof of X algorithms and just incredible and intricate logic. And it is complicated, but the humans are going to find this really valuable. It's going to start with some of the nerdier humans that build applications. It's going to move to other nerdy humans that like to build businesses that take advantage of the latest in distributed storage. And it's going to make the impossible, the seemingly impossible, possible and pretty common at some point soon. And so Juan's project, the Ethereum project, many other projects in our ecosystem, we're all doing our part to make that daunting task of standing up the Web3 ecosystem, essentially the next generation, the next evolution of the World Wide Web, not just possible, but sort of obvious as we're building it in layers, and it will all seem to make perfect sense in retrospect.
For sure. So I want to get into some audience questions here. We've just got a few minutes left. I'll dive into Nelson's question first. So he says, as a small miner, he's hopeful that the Filecoin ecosystem will continue to grow, including the localized retrieval mining aspect. It's a very interesting aspect of Filecoin, and I too wonder whether this is going to bring back mining to like the home computer, because we kind of lost that with the advent of ASICs and all of that. It became this very specialized industry. But I mean, storage space is kind of the same across the board. So I'm wondering too, is this going to become this renaissance of like home mining enterprises?
That's the hope. So when you think about data distribution, you really want to store the data and serve it to the user as fast as possible, right? So that means that the data itself has to be close to the users. There's something you can't cheat, and that's the speed of light, right? And so like that's, you're never gonna go faster than the speed of light. And so to be able to transfer a lot of data very quickly to users, today, most computing systems deploy all kinds of copies of data very close to the users in the edge. And so that's where the retrieval market of Filecoin is coming in. To build out that whole network of users of miners with data storage capabilities very close to other users, so the retrieval can be super fast. Right now, the retrieval market is in its infancy. It's going to grow over time. Right now, the main thing is the storage market and getting all of the storage capacity and starting to bring the applications. As the applications and the data come in, then that can start flowing into the retrieval market. There's one kind of really important incentive questions there where it'll make a lot of sense to bring in the retrieval market in larger scales once the applications are there with the data to provide that demand. Otherwise, people might run a whole application and not actually store that many copies of things and whatnot. So that's sort of the retrieval market is going to grow over time as we grow at the client side of the network.
Yeah. Joseph, I think this is a question for you, although I'm not quite sure. So Chi Feng, and apologies if I didn't pronounce that correctly, says for Filecoin's price discovery, is it to some extent comparable to DEX's mechanism, such as reducing slippage, protect users, and provide service at a price that they initially ask for? Is that something that you feel you could answer to do with the Ethereum's interface that they'll be providing?
Filecoin price discovery or file price discovery. Juan, why don't you step in if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think the question is around the storage market side of things, where the price discovery for storage. If I'm understanding the question correctly, it's around will there kind of be sort of decentralized exchanges for
Right.
storage, and then will the pricing kind of be following all the good patterns and good features from those exchanges.
I feel like it is he is or she is perhaps talking about the lack of a counterparty, that the software itself is the counterparty, so you can just enter in the price that you're after rather than trying to find a bid-ask spread. I presume is the
yeah,
question.
exactly. So I mean, I think over time, as the network grows, and as the capacity starts getting used, and as there are more clients and users and so on, the number of asks and bids on both sides of the storage market are going to increase. And at that point, it's really gonna require and be benefit from that kind of functionality. For the most part right now, a lot of the price and cost of storing the data on the network is being subsidized by the block reward. So the prices can be really cheap and are mostly kind of just default oriented, and they're not kind of, we're not hitting like a proper market point where the capacity is starting to get used up and miners are becoming price sensitive on the deals. So for the most part right now, miners can afford to just drop the prices dramatically and take a lot of user data. I think they just haven't gotten around to doing that yet. But as the usage of data picks up, that'll come in.
Right.
Yeah, as the system matures, we're going to see increasingly efficient price discovery mechanisms. So it is more of an order book than an automated market maker. We see lots of automated market makers in the DeFi space. They are valuable for reducing slippage in certain contexts. In other contexts, they're not so good. And so, it's a very valuable functionality, and there will be so many smart people, both technical nerds and financial nerds, that get in there and build essentially DeFi mechanisms around the Filecoin.
Yeah. Miles Foreman asks, when it comes to media such as music and movies, are you concerned the platform will suffer from the same legal issues that Mega Upload had to deal with? So on the one hand, you could have these deals where you have distribution deals, and I can definitely see Filecoin being a solution to that. But on the other side, pirating and all of that, is that a concern that you're worried about?
So definitely in any kind of distribution platform, pricing becomes a concern. But for the most part, IPFS has been running for quite a while, and that has been a very small problem, which is very good. And part of it is the approach to the content policy that really puts the power in users' hands to define what they want to distribute and what they don't. But I'm actually not that concerned about this in the long term, because what's really going to happen here is that music and video will start shifting the creation and production angles, right? And so we're seeing it right now with Audios and Ujo. They are projects that are building out the music side of things, where creators can come in and connect with their fans directly and fund their own work and their own creation and their own releases directly without having to go to kind of record studios and record labels and whatnot. And they're doing that decentralized first. And so the real answer to that in the very long term is building a dramatically better distribution platform that maybe starts with a long tail, and then over time starts getting most of the rights to most of the music and video out there. Now, of course, kind of the large studios and so on will continue to exist and will continue to produce their content. The challenge there will be to create distribution platforms that are compliant with their restrictions. So for example, when you stream a movie from Netflix, the video is coming to your computer. Your computer is grabbing that image. Your computer could be snapshotting all of that image and video and redistributing in a peer-to-peer network and kind of in a piracy-oriented way. Now, it doesn't happen because it's just fairly hard, and most people don't go around hacking their systems. So the likelihood of that happening is so low that Netflix can afford to give an extremely good user experience that does provide that without a big burden, but kind of like still keep any kind of problem to a minimum. And we think that that's the answer to most of these questions. Most of the piracy doesn't come from a cost model from like a monetary cost model. It comes from a usability cost model. It's just way harder to use any kind of walled garden kind of thing. And so if you make something that is super easy to use, has a phenomenal user experience, and people can pay with their tokens, like that's the way to do it. Like you can have a Netflix-like service that is fully compliant with all kind of content restrictions and so on in Web3 that uses tokens to distribute it. And hey, by the way, you no longer have to leak out what movies and so on you like watching to the centralized cloud provider. But there's no reason you can't comply with all the content policies.
Yeah.
In a context of great usability, great user interface, very inexpensive content, piracy just doesn't matter. It becomes irrelevant.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely something that that iTunes kind of figured out when we were dealing with Napster, et cetera. And then iTunes came along and said, we're going to make it super cheap and super easy for you to just pay a small amount. And once you see those incentives in line, you really, saw people kind of stop pirating. I think that HBO had this issue in Australia where they just didn't release Game of Thrones. And so no one in Australia had access. So it became like the most pirated show of all time, because the only way people had access to it is to like buy the DVD set or something. And who has a DVD player these days? So it is interesting, as you start to see these incentives models align, distribution becomes this whole new game. I love the idea of artists starting to have ownership in their content more. I love to see what this decentralized movement is doing to the democratization of media, to all of that. I think that Filecoin is going to have a huge role in that. I love to see what ConsenSys is doing with that as well. And I am very excited to see this integration, see this collaboration, and what happens, because it's two kind of bedrocks of this decentralized movement, and two powerhouses combining their knowledge and wisdom and skills. I'm very excited to see what's going to happen in the future. But this is, we've actually run out of time here, but I want to thank you both so much for coming on this panel and chatting about this. And I look forward to seeing what happens in the future. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you so much, Naomi.
Before you go, sign up to my weekly crypto newsletter, where you'll be updated with the latest crypto news in under 5 minutes. Sign up at naomibrockwell.com/cryptobeat. I also have a members only newsletter where you'll get access to exclusive content at naomibrockwell.com/memberships. You can send support to the channel at cointree.app/naomibrockwell. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and thank you so much for watching.